And hello everyone, welcome back to your C++ tutorial. So in the previous tutorial, we talked about how you can move your classes into different files. In this tutorial, we'll be talking about inheritance. To keep things simple, I'm going to put everything inside of one file because then we don't have to constantly move between files. Now, when we think of inheritance, we should think of it almost like you inheriting something from your parents, like inheriting your father's dark colored hair or inheriting your mother's height. That is basically what inheritance is. We can apply the same thing to classes, which, as I told you, is basically objects. You yourself, you are an object. So an object can inherit from another object, such as your parent. So let's create a class and call it car. This can be like any type of car. Currently we can just give it one function and we can just call it double calculate. It takes in an int amount of kilometers and then returns the amount of fuel that gets used. So let's say by default a car uses the amount of kilometers divided by 2 amount of fuel. Now when we go here and we create a car and we say my car, and then we just go cout my car dot calculate fuel, and we pass in 18. So if they went 18 kilometers, then I go back into my folder and I compile, then we get 9. So that's the basics. We just created a very basic class that has one function, and that's to calculate the amount of fuel a car uses. Now here, we can create another class, and let's call this a truck. Now you can think of a truck as just another car, but it is bigger, so it will take more fuel. And it might have things like more wheels, and we might want to include the width and the length of this truck. But then we can just go here and say public and then car. Now this colon symbol right here allows us to inherit. So this means inherit from this class we pass in. That means everything inside of this class gets given to this truck. So now this truck is this car. So let's actually create a truck and we can call this my truck. And now here we can do the same, but we can say my truck. You'll notice we use the same amount of fuel and everything works, even though this class has nothing inside of it. Because we inherit from car, we inherit all of its public functions and variables and whatnot. So this calculate fuel, that is now part of this truck as well. However, the difference is now we can do something such as add another public variable. And because this is a truck, what else can a truck do? We can say calculate load. So this is how much load the truck can hold. And let's say to determine the amount of load a truck can hold, and this should of course be maybe like a double or something. Let's say to calculate the amount of load it can hold, we must pass in the truck width. I don't actually know any math like that, but you know. Now to calculate this load, we can just return basic function width times 2. So it can carry the amount of things in kilograms times its width. And we can just say double for width. Now here with my truck, we can do the calculate fuel, but now we can also say calculate load and pass in 18.8 for example. If we run this, we get 37.6. But now you should take note, my car does not have a calculate load function. The reason for this is because it is the base class, also known as the super class. It has a set amount of things inside of it. This class that inherits, also known as the subclass or a child class, has everything the car class has, and more. So it's kind of like also inheriting from your parents. Let's say you have everything your parents has, plus you have a computer skill, which they might not have. It's the same as that. So if I were to try and do the same here, but instead of my truck, we're to say my car, then I'll get an error because this calculate load only exists on my truck. And that is the power of inheritance. Now you can also overwrite something that the class above you have given you. For example, this calculate fuel, it is perfectly fine. However, I feel a truck would use a lot more fuel than a car would. So instead of saying divided by 2, we say times 2 this time. So now to calculate fuel would be a lot more than with a car. And these two are going to basically be the same. So I'm just going to, instead of times 2, we can say times 1.5, just to keep these two separate. Now we can just go back here to my truck, run it, and we'll get 927.37. So these two has the same function, calculate fuel, but how they calculate the fuel is completely different. Even here we could do something like give a C out and say my func. Now if we were to run it, we'll get a C out with it. So this is the power of inheritance. You might not quite see the benefit of this yet, but basically you have a class, and now you can extend that class or inherit from it, and basically meaning you can get everything inside of that class, and you can add on top of it and overwrite what it already has. So let's say with calculate fuel, you just want to do integers. You don't want to return a double. Now here you could just say kilometers times 2 then, because then since both of these are integers, it will return integer instead of a double. And this here is also known as polymorphism.
Polymorphism.
When you take a function that already exists and you overwrite it once you inherited it. So this right there, that's
polymorphism.
Now you'll notice when we do something such as, and let's actually go to the top here and say private. And what can we make private? Maybe the brand of the car. So let's say std string brand. So now we have a variable brand. Let's give it by default and make it Toyota, just to make things simple. Toyota. Now we can create a getter, std string get brand, and this get brand will contain a string, or not, it will contain a string, it will return a string, this brand. Now let's quickly go here where it says my truck and just change that to my car, and we can say get brand. Now when we run this, we get Toyota, which is understandable. Now when we say get brand, what do you think will we get? When we run this, we also get Toyota. Now, when we go here to car, and let's say we create a function, or let's just keep it to this get brand, that's fine. But let's go here to this truck, and we create a function that basically sets the brand. So, void set brand, std string brand. And in here, we can just say this brand, and you'll already notice something. We are not getting autocomplete for this brand here. But let's say this brand is equal to brand. Now immediately we'll be getting an error because this brand is inaccessible. Whilst this getter works perfectly fine inside of this car, when we get to the truck, this here will no longer work with this brand. If we were to copy this and in a sense overwrite it, then you'll notice we also get that error. So even though we could use it here with this truck, once we try to implement it ourselves, we're getting a massive error because now we can't access brand. So you should be careful of this, because this brand here is private. And yes, it is set here inside of our car class, but we cannot access it inside of our truck class. And this is where the protected comes in handy. So protected. Protected is like private. However, it also gets inherited to the child, meaning you can still access it if it's inside of protected, unlike with private, where if it's in private, then once you inherit this class, you can no longer modify it or read it. Only the functions that are there by default still have the ability to read it, but even once you try to overwrite it, it's going to throw an error. With protected, it's different. So let's go here and say int wheels, and we can make that equal to 4 by default. Then we can create a get wheels, which returns this dot wheels. And here we can just go from string to int. And now we have a get wheels here. We can remove this set brand for now. Or actually, let's just keep it here for a second. And here with get car, we can say get wheels. And here with get truck, we can say get wheels to make sure we're getting the wheels. And there we go. We get 4 with both. However, now because this is in protected and no longer in private, we can take this wheels and we can go here, and instead of this set brand, we can say set wheels, and we can go int wheels. And now we can say this, and in our arrow, wheels, we can actually access wheels now, is equal to wheels. So this is the power of protected. It allows us to access what is ever in here, but should still be private outside of this class. So it's not as strict as private, but it's not as public as public. It can still be used and seen inside of your child class, aka your truck, but it cannot be seen or used outside of it here. So if I go my car dot wheels, you'll notice we don't get a wheels here. That is because it's still considered private outside of the class, except for those that inherit from it. Now, of course, here we can go and say my truck dot set wheels, and let's make it 10. Cool. Now, when we run it, we'll get 10 here. So we could set the wheels and we could get the wheels. Now, take note that inheriting once is just the basics. You can still inherit from truck and you can still inherit from car. For example, I could say here class, and let's say minivan. A minivan inherits from public, and we can just make that with a capital M, and there we go. This is still possible. More than one thing can inherit from this car class. You can do 10, 20, 50. And the same can be said for this truck. So if we go here, we can say truck. Now minivan has everything truck has, and has everything car has, because truck has everything car has. So when we inherit from truck, we inherit from car as well, because truck has everything inside of car. And it will proceed the same way. You can create private and protected variables and functions here. You can overwrite functions from the truck class. It's the same process. Just this time this minivan will inherit everything from truck, while the truck will inherit everything from car. And yeah, that's the basics of inheritance. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next C++ tutorial.